Welcome to the Football Film Room Show. I'm Nick Kehoe. We got another loaded show for you today. We're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers going up against his former team on Sunday nights. We're going to talk about that Giants' historic collapse in Denver. But before we do any of that, I want to go back to 1987 and the San Francisco 49ers. And once again, stick with me. I'm going somewhere with this. This is relevant to current NFL events. So back in 1987, the 49ers seemed to be at a bit of a crossroads at the quarterback position. Joe Montana had won 2 Super Bowls and 2 Super Bowl MVPs, was widely regarded as the best quarterback in the NFL, and even at that point, possibly of all time. But during the 86 season, he injured his back in week 1 and then had to have surgery. And it was a pretty serious surgery. I mean, back surgery is always serious, but there were thoughts that he would be out for the rest of that season, and that could possibly end his career. Now, he did end up making it back that season, played the final 7 games, didn't quite look like himself, wasn't as mobile, threw 7 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, very unlike Montana. And then the 49ers got to the NFC Divisional Round playoffs against the Giants, and they got the doors beat off them. They lost 49-3. Montana did not look very good, threw 2 interceptions. One of them was a pick 6 before the end of the half to give the Giants a 27-3 lead. He got knocked out on the play by Jim Burt. And just heading into that offseason, it seemed like the future was very uncertain for Joe Montana. Certainly was in Bill Walsh's eyes. Head coach Bill Walsh didn't think that Montana had that much left in him. And so he traded for Steve Young that offseason. Now, according to Steve Young, what Walsh had told him was that Montana, this was his second back surgery. You don't come back from that. He's not going to be around very much longer. He's not going to be able to play very much longer. And so Steve Young was thrilled to be traded to the 49ers. He thought he'd be stepping into a starting role relatively soon. But when he got there in 87, he showed up at minicamp and he saw Joe Montana out on the field looking like Joe Montana. He was moving well, throwing the ball wherever he wanted to, putting the ball exactly where he wanted to. And Steve Young thought to himself, well, this doesn't seem like a Joe Montana who's done. And that was exactly the case, because that year, Montana, despite only playing in 13 games, if you remember there was the player strike that year, he set a career high in touchdown passes with 31. The 49ers went 13-2 that season, had the number 1 seed, seemed like they were right back to where they were just a few years earlier when they had won their second Super Bowl, and they were the favorite heading into the postseason to return to the big game. Only in their divisional round game against the Vikings, they got blown out once again. And this was Montana's 3rd straight bad playoff game, his 3rd straight playoff loss. And not only that, he got benched for Steve Young in the middle of that game. And Steve Young played pretty well, made some good plays, made some mistakes, but coming out of that game, even some players in the Vikings defense were saying, man, this is the quarterback of the future. So heading into 1988, the 49ers had a quarterback controversy on their hands. And that's not me saying it. That was Bill Walsh was saying that. He was talking to the media saying we have to make a decision at quarterback. Now, Montana ended up winning the job out of training camp. Started the first game, the 49ers won, and then he had a bit of an ailment. So Bill Walsh used that as an excuse to play Steve Young in Game 2. Young did not play very well. Montana still did dress. He was there. He was available just in case the Niners needed him. And so he came in at the end of that game and ended up saving the 49ers' tail, throwing a game-winning touchdown at the end to beat the Giants. But the 49ers that year, they kind of went up and down. The offense was inconsistent. It wasn't what you normally saw and expected from the 49ers. And it seemed like Bill Walsh was using every excuse he could to get Steve Young in the game. You know, if Montana had a slight ailment or was sick, Bill Walsh would say, oh, he's not 100%. I think we need to go with Steve this week. And so Young got the opportunity to start. And in a game against the Vikings, the team that had knocked the 49ers out of the playoffs the year before, he led the Niners to victory, had one of the more iconic runs in NFL history. It's the play where he's zigging and zagging all over the field, avoiding defenders, and then instead of just running into the end zone, he stumbles into the end zone in really dramatic fashion. 49ers win that game. Steve Young gets the next start against the Cardinals, and according to Young, Walsh went up to him before that game and said, hey, if you play well, the starting job is yours. And so the 49ers went out in that game. They took a 23-0 lead. The offense was looking as good as they've ever looked, and then everything collapsed. They gave up 24 points in the last 15 minutes, including a last-second touchdown pass. Ended up losing the game 24-23. And Steve Young, to this day, says, if we had won that game, if I had just made one more play, I would have been the starting quarterback of the 49ers. But because they lost, Walsh turned back to Montana, and Montana took over the job from that point forward, and really the season turned around from there. Niners won 4 of their last 5 games, got into the playoffs. They got another rematch against the Vikings in the playoffs, blew them out. Montana was unbelievable. Then they played the Bears in Chicago in the NFC Championship game, beat them 28-3. And then in the Super Bowl against the Bengals, trailing 16-13 with just a few minutes left, Montana led the Niners on a 92-yard drive, scored the game-winning touchdown. He cemented his legacy, cemented his status as the starter going forward. And even though Bill Walsh retired after that season, 49ers didn't miss a beat. Montana won his first MVP in 1989, went on to win the Super Bowl. They beat the Broncos that year 55-10. Montana threw 5 touchdown passes, another Super Bowl MVP. 1990, he ended up winning another MVP. 49ers lost to the Giants in the NFC Championship game, and then the injuries started coming back for Montana. He hurt his elbow entering 1991. That gave the job to Steve Young. And look, when he finally got the opportunity, he went on to have himself a Hall of Fame career. He won the MVP in 92, won it again in 94, won the Super Bowl in 94, and even broke Joe Montana's record with 6 touchdown passes in the Super Bowl. Ended up retiring after the 1999 season. Again, Hall of Fame career, one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen. But if we go back to that 1988 season, that game against the Cardinals, everything could have been so much different. Instead of Steve Young sitting here with just one Super Bowl, he could have been the quarterback leading the 1988 49ers to their 3rd ring. He could have been the quarterback leading them in 1989 to their 4th ring. Who knows how many Super Bowls he could have won? 3 at a minimum, I think, is a safe assumption. But as we all know, Young didn't get that chance, and it came down to that one game against the Cardinals, against the Phoenix Cardinals, a 24-23 loss where the Niners blew a 23-point lead in the final 15 minutes. Don't ever let anyone tell you that one game can't make a difference. And that brings us to the New York Giants. Now, as you all know, the Giants lost in excruciating fashion to the Denver Broncos last week. They had a 19-0 lead entering the 4th quarter. They had an 18-point lead with just 6 minutes remaining in the game, and they ended up allowing 33 points in the final 15 minutes to lose to the Broncos 33-32. Now, prior to that collapse, the Giants looked to be on their way. Jackson Dart, rookie quarterback, led the Giants to wins over the Chargers, the Eagles, and then what would have been the Broncos, 3 really good teams. Giants would have been 3-4, ready to make some noise in the NFC East with a long way to go, ready to make some noise in the NFC in general, and they still can. The season's not over, but they're now 2-5, and just that small difference of 3-4 to 2-5, it changes the complexion of the season. Now, if the Giants go on to make the playoffs, this could mean nothing. We'll look back on this game and laugh and say it was a great learning experience for the coaches, for Jackson Dart, etc. But if they don't, and Brian Daboll can't get this team to the playoffs, say he ends up losing his job, this will be the game that we all look back to and say, what if? What if the Giants had won that game? What if they did keep it rolling? Now, I can't predict the future, but I do think we're going to look back at this loss to the Broncos and say, man, things would have been a lot different, at least for this coaching regime, if they had won this game. And that's because this game really opens your eyes to the questions with the Giants coaching staff. Is this the group of leaders? Is this the head coach, the defensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator? Is this the group that's going to get this team over the hump? They seem to have the quarterback in Jackson Dart, although it's only been 4 games. But from what we've seen so far, he not only has good skills, but he has good feel, which is hard to find. It's hard to quantify that when you're watching college tape, but I think we can all acknowledge that Jackson Dart kind of understands how to manage a game, how to manage a pass rush. Sure, he's made mistakes. He made a big mistake on Sunday. But there's definitely something to his game outside of just the quantifiable stuff. But this game is representative of what's gone wrong with the Giants regime under Brian Daboll. The end-of-game management, the kicking game, and the issues with their kickers that just continues to happen. They have seem to have more kicking injuries than any team in the history of the NFL. And then the inability to step on another team's throat. You don't win in the NFL by being timid. You don't win in the NFL by hoping the other team makes mistakes. You have to force them to make mistakes. You have to do things on both sides of the ball that make them speed up their process, that make them blow assignments. And one of my biggest issues with the Giants, and we've seen it a bunch of times last few years, but in this game, they just didn't have that killer instinct on defense. Now, in Shane Bowen's defense, the defensive coordinator's defense, for lack of a better term, the Giants weren't being ultra aggressive all game. This wasn't a situation where they built that 19-0 lead by blitzing, playing tight man coverage, just putting the pressure on the Broncos the entire time. They played zone like they normally do. They disguised a little bit, moved post-snap, but it was pretty much a defense that played top-down. The goal seemed to be to keep the Broncos' passing game in front of them, which they did for the most part. And then when they got that 19-0 lead and then the 26-8 lead, they continued playing that way. So I can't blame them for that. I think that's just generally the way they played. But there were certain moments where they absolutely could have been more aggressive. There were definitely certain moments where they took the foot off the gas pedal. There was a situation where there was a 1st and 20 after a holding penalty on the Broncos, and instead of taking advantage of that 1st and 20, I mean, it's 4-down territory at this point. The Broncos, they're not going to punt the ball away. They need a bunch of scores. So they can orchestrate their offense around having 4 plays to get 20 yards. The Giants just allowed them to pick it up, allowed them to make 3rd down and 4th down more manageable with really soft zone. It just didn't make sense at that time. Now, I'm not saying you have to go cover 0 blitz. I'm not saying you have to be overly aggressive, but do something to just not allow the offense to take a check down and have that turn into a 10-yard gain. But the Giants did that, and then it turned into a 4th and 2, so a much more manageable situation for the Broncos. The Giants had a defensive pass interference as a result of that, and the Broncos would go on to score that drive. Then you had the final drive of the game. There was barely any time left. The Broncos had no timeouts. They needed to get in the field goal range, and the Giants rushed 3 and dropped 8. Now, in Shane Bowen's defense, when you drop 8 into coverage and the quarterback throws the ball in the middle of 4 or 5 defenders, you should be able to make a play on the ball. But at the same time, why are you giving them that opportunity? Why are you giving Bo Nix the opportunity to not have to face a pass rush and then allow him to throw the ball downfield? I mean, he's lucky he didn't throw it deep. The Broncos very easily could have gotten a pass interference penalty, spot foul, 30, 40 yards downfield, just like the Giants did on the previous drive. So you want to avoid those types of situations, and I think you can do that by, I don't know, bringing a blitz. You don't have to be an overly aggressive blitz. It can be a blitz that just, you don't sacrifice too many men in coverage. You bring 4 or 5. You could do it with 4. You overload one side. You make them get rid of the ball quickly in the middle of the field. And when they're getting rid of the ball, they're not throwing the ball downfield. It's a quick throw underneath, so they got to run up and spike it. They eat up the clock. That's how you make them eat up the clock, right? You don't do it by rushing 3, giving them time to throw the ball downfield, and then hope that your defensive backs make a play on the ball. Just too much risk there. And as fate would have it, I don't think the receiver he was throwing to on that play to get them over midfield, I don't think that was his intended receiver. This looked like a dagger concept where you had one receiver running downfield as kind of a clear out, and then another receiver, it was Cortland Sutton in this case, running an in-breaker from the same side underneath that through route. And I think Nix was trying to hit the in-breaker, and he ended up completing the pass to the through route, who happened to be in the same area. And that's just a perfect example of why you don't allow them to get the ball downfield. And that's why you don't rush 3. You don't put it in the hands of your coverage that's been struggling in the fourth quarter. You don't allow for the opportunity for there to be a fluke catch like that kind of seemed to be. So that's my biggest gripe with the Giants' approach. It wasn't the entire fourth quarter where they were just playing zone coverage and letting them dink and dunk their way down the field easily. But there were select moments where the Giants needed to be more aggressive, and they just didn't have that killer instinct, and they really haven't under this regime, and that's been a problem. But even more so than the scheme, I think you have to look at some of the discipline of the players. If you want to criticize the coaching staff, I think the biggest place to criticize them is in how the players perform. And that's sort of a vague, nebulous way of criticizing coaches, just making them responsible for player performance generally. But they are somewhat responsible for the way that their team performs, and they are responsible for their players understanding situations to a certain extent. And the Giants just had too many individual mistakes throughout the course of their collapse. For instance, when the Giants led 26-16, the Broncos had the ball deep in their territory, faced a 3rd and 5. Kayvon Thibodeau jumped off sides, gave them a first down. Can't have that. Had the Giants gotten a stop there, maybe the Broncos kick a field goal instead of getting a touchdown, and instead of the score being 26-23, it's 26-19. And so the next time the Broncos score, they're scoring a touchdown to tie the game instead of taking the lead. Obviously, that has an impact on the way the Giants' offense plays the rest of the game as well. Then you have Bo Nix's go-ahead touchdown run, where he gets to the perimeter. Deonte Banks has a chance to go outside and force him to cut back inside where the rest of the Giants' defense is, but he doesn't do that. Goes inside, lets Nix get around him, ends up walking in easily for a touchdown. And then, of course, you've got the Giants' inability on the last 2 plays to make a play on the ball in the secondary. They had 2 chances. Couldn't make either of them. When you go to the other side of the ball, of course, you have the Jackson Dart interception. That was a bad interception. You can't turn the ball over in that situation. You have to make the Broncos be able to drive the field to score. You can't give them a short field when they're up against it from a time standpoint. Now, I've heard some people say that Jackson Dart shouldn't have even been allowed to throw on that play, and I completely disagree with that. That, to me, is a criticism that's a little bit... It's a little bit because we have access to the results. We say it was a bad play call. 3rd down, you're up by 10. You've got your young quarterback who you are grooming to be your franchise quarterback. In the future, he is going to need to be able to make key 3rd downs. He's going to need to be able to do that when the Giants are trailing, when the game is tied late, or when the Giants have the lead and they need to get first downs to keep the ball in their possession. I have absolutely no problem with him throwing the ball on 3rd down. That's who he's going to need to be. That's what any franchise quarterback needs to be able to do. They need to be able to convert on 3rd downs in big moments. And in this case, it was to be able to keep the ball. I'm not on board with just run the ball into the middle of the offensive line and punt it away. Nope. You don't rely on your defense to run out the clock. So if you're an offense and you have the opportunity to keep the ball in your hands, you do it. This was a 3rd and 5. They weren't asking Jackson Dart to make a miraculous downfield throw. They were asking him to pick up 5 yards, which any quarterback anywhere in their career should be able to do, or know that if you can't pick up the 5 yards, you protect the ball. Now, Dart, he's a rookie. We've seen that playmaker streak in him. That's what he wants to do. He needs to learn when to pull it down, needs to learn when to live to play another day. This is a mistake that will live with him for the rest of his career. He will always remember this, and hopefully he doesn't make the same mistake. I look at it for him as a learning experience, but come on, 3rd and 5. Let's give him a chance to make a play. He's earned that trust to this point in his career, in those 4 games he's played. Give him the opportunity to make something happen on 3rd down. I would much rather have my offense controlling the clock, controlling the outcome of the game, than leaving it in my defense's hands and hoping that, well, we can play it just right so that the Broncos gain enough yards, but they chew up enough clock in the process. No, you save that for like 2.5 minutes left. You save the defense managing the clock for 2.5 minutes left in the game when you're up by 10, and you know that if the other team scores but they eat up enough clock, they're not going to be able to recover an onside kick. No one does that anymore. You're going to be able to get the ball back, kneel on it, and the game's over. You don't do that with 5 minutes left. You don't do that with 6 minutes left. You don't do that with 15 minutes left. You don't ask your defense to manage the clock. You ask your defense to get stops. You ask your defense to make a play. If you want to drain the clock, you want to play the 4-minute offense game, have your offense do it. And that's what the Giants are trying to do there. That's one place where I don't think the criticism is founded. All that being said, this one game may have changed the course of history for the Giants. Only time will tell. Now let's get to Aaron Rodgers, who plays against his former team, the Packers, on Sunday night in Pittsburgh. And first, I just want to talk about him and how he's been playing this year. I mentioned back in Week 1 that my biggest takeaway from the Steelers' win over the Jets was how Rodgers was throwing the ball. Now, one of the most special things about the way he's played throughout his career is that when Rodgers sees an open receiver, the time from him spotting the open receiver to getting the ball out is so quick. It's possibly unlike anything we've seen from any other quarterback. And it doesn't matter where his feet are. He can get rid of that ball. He can put it wherever he wants to the second he sees an open receiver. And then he just delivers lasers downfield that are deadly accurate. That was missing last year. Because clearly he was still coming back from that Achilles injury, and everything you do when you throw starts from the ground up, starts from your feet. So whatever push-off he was used to getting, his Achilles, it wasn't as strong, even though it was healed. And so clearly there was something off with the timing, the way he threw, throwing motion. He just wasn't as accurate when he made those quick snap throws. And then I think he lost a little bit of confidence in the way he was throwing the ball because he was like, well, I've spent 18 years just being able to get rid of the ball whenever I want to and putting it where I want to, and now it's not really working out the same way. And so you saw some completely strange misses, some completely uncharacteristic misses from him last year. And you actually saw a little bit of that in 2022 as well. The previous season he had played, that was his last year with the Packers. That was more due to the fact that he had a broken thumb in his throwing hand. So, of course, that impacted his ability to put the ball where he wanted to, when he wanted to. So it's really been the first time since 2021, his last MVP season, that we've seen him throw the ball as well as he has so far this season. And that was something I pointed out in the Jets game, and I've seen it in the last 5 games he's played as well. Gone through every single one of Rodgers' throws, and merely from a physical throwing the ball standpoint, he looks just like he did in 2021 during that MVP season. Now, I'm not saying he's going to win the MVP. I'm not saying he's playing at an MVP level. I'm just saying merely from a physical throwing the ball standpoint, he looks as good as ever. And you saw that last Thursday night against the Bengals. Not only was he throwing the ball all over the field, but his Hail Mary at the end of the game traveled nearly 70 yards in the air. It was the longest recorded pass through the air in the NFL since 2017. His arm alone, if it was just about his ability to throw the ball, he could play till he's 50. He's still elite in that area. And then, of course, the other thing that Aaron Rodgers really brings to this team is his ability at the line of scrimmage. We've seen it a couple times where he's been able to use a hard count. He's been able to get a beat on what the defense is doing. That allows him to set the protection, allows him to know what the coverage is going to be, and then he can pick his matchup and take advantage of whatever one-on-one that he wants to. So those are the 2 key places where Aaron Rodgers has been really good this year. And then the last part is mobility. His mobility is not what it once was. It's better than it was last year. And more importantly, he looks healthier when he's moving. He looks healthier when he's throwing. He's not taking as many hits as he did with the Jets. And that's allowing him to throw the ball the way he wants to. Now, you saw on Thursday night, and I think you'll see sporadically throughout the season, Rodgers running around and making plays with his legs. He had a couple touchdowns where he was scrambling and made second reaction plays, second reaction throws. You saw that against the Browns the week before as well. Rodgers still has that in him. It's not as prevalent. He can't always escape the pocket, and it really is a game-to-game proposition depending on how he feels. You sort of don't know until you see him moving, and then you say, all right, he feels pretty good today. Or if you don't see him moving a lot, you say, all right, there's probably some ailment that he's got that's keeping him from being able to run around so well. But he does have that element to his game. The problem with Rodgers right now and the Steelers' offense right now is that the passing game is still limited. They're not attacking downfield that much. Again, Thursday's game notwithstanding, where he did push the ball downfield more. That could have been more product of the Bengals than the Steelers necessarily. But the Steelers are really a condensed offense, playing with a lot of big personnel. They're trying to run the ball. They're trying to manage their offensive line not being that effective. I think the overarching philosophy of the Steelers' offense has been let's get the ball out of Rodgers' hands. And that's for a couple reasons. It's for what I just said. The offensive line has started the year kind of uncertain up front in pass protection. If Rodgers has to hold the ball too long, they're really at a disadvantage. Gotten a little better, but it's still an issue. And Rodgers, he's 41. I mean, he doesn't want to take that many big hits. I think that's pretty clear. That's not uncommon. That's not unusual. You saw it in Tom Brady in his final year in Tampa, where everything about the passing game seemed to be geared around, let's just get the ball out of Brady's hands as quick as possible. It's the same thing this year with Rodgers. And you saw it last year too. It was the same thing with the Jets. The problem is that does prevent the passing game from really straining the defense. Right now what the Steelers' passing game is a lot of quick game, a lot of screens, a lot of smoke, bubbles, play action boot, and then Rodgers hitting ISOs on the outside. You don't see a lot of those 3-level stretch plays or concepts where Rodgers is hanging in the pocket, hitting receivers at the intermediate level. And I think when he's had opportunities to, he's been a little gun shy, or he's just been unwilling to hang in the pocket. I think if his first couple reads aren't open, he's been starting to look at the rush and looking for an escape lane and looking for a way to run. But that I think is the worst you can say about Rodgers this year, though. There's no egregious mistakes, really. I mean, most of his interceptions have been, 2 of them have hit his receivers in the hands. 2 are probably on him for just, really bad decisions, and 1 was at the end of a game when they were down by 2 possessions and it really didn't matter. But the worst thing you can say about Rodgers is that there are some times when he's not letting the play develop, and it makes you say what could have been. But you can't quite say that he missed a play necessarily, because it's not like guys are open. It's not like he's leaving big plays on the field. All you can do is sort of speculate that had he held onto the ball a little bit further and not moved off one receiver, the defense wouldn't have reacted the way they did, and maybe the route would have had a chance to develop. So we'll see if the Steelers start to push the ball downfield a little bit more, have more shot plays, have more plays that are 3-level stretch and are designed to hit the intermediate level, or if they continue this game of just getting the ball out of Rodgers' hands and occasionally taking a shot on the outside on an ISO route. Because with Rodgers, if he sees a one-on-one, that guy is open. There's always a throw to beat the coverage. And so they can live that way. And so far, it's been somewhat effective. I mean, Rodgers is on pace for, he's got, 105 rating, 68% completion percentage, and he's on pace for 40 touchdown passes at age 41, going on 42. So the Steelers can survive playing this way, but I don't know how much they'll win playing this way unless the defense becomes lights out. And the defense so far has been hit or miss. Last week's game was just, I don't even know what you say about it. It was just an awful performance by the defense. They were spot dropping in zone, and guys looked lost. They didn't have a good plan for Jamar Chase. When they did finally decide to double Jamar Chase because he got about 100 targets, Joe Flacco was able to take advantage of one-on-ones elsewhere. So their coverage is a concern. Their ability to force quarterbacks to hold the ball, allowing their pass rush to get home, that is a concern. Their run defense has been underwhelming. They've really been a week-to-week defense, and we're getting into, this is now week 8. They've played 6 games. At a certain point, the defense just is what it is, and we can't keep holding on for hope that the Steelers, they're finally going to get their act together because they have in years past. There's sort of not many signs to indicate that they are going to get it together. This isn't going to turn into the 2015 Broncos defense like Peyton Manning had in his last hurrah 10 years ago. So the question is, will the Steelers' offense change the way they play based on how the defense plays? Because that's what you've sort of seen. They had the game against the Vikings where the defense played well, had the game against the Browns where the defense played well, and the offense could just play that ball control game. They could be quick getting the ball out. And then they played the Bengals, and the defense couldn't stop a nosebleed, so the offense threw the ball downfield more. That's the part of the Steelers team I can't quite figure out yet. Are they playing a certain way on offense to cover for the defense? Are they doing it to cover for the offensive line? Are they doing it because Rodgers just wants to get the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible? Are they going to evolve over the course of the season, or is this just what we have 6 games in? We'll find out a little bit more on Sunday when they play the Packers, because the Packers are very good on both sides of the ball, and the Steelers will not luck their way into a win in this one. They're going to have their hands full with Micah Parsons from a pass rushing standpoint. They're going to have their hands full with the Packers offense. You know, you look at the teams that they've played this year, and that Packers offense might be the best one they've played so far. I think the Packers defense is probably also the best defense they've played. So we'll see. Are the Steelers able to push the ball downfield? Are they going to open up the offense like they did against the Bengals, knowing they have to score points against the Packers? Are they going to try to play ball control? Whatever they do, I think we're going to learn something about who the Steelers are moving forward. This is a big game in their season in terms of figuring out, are they really a contender? Do they have what it takes to beat one of the better teams? Or are they just going to be a middling team again that will probably win the division because of the competition there, but won't do much in the playoffs? That's it for today's show. Thank you all for listening. If you're interested in reading more about Aaron Rodgers and how he's played this season, I will have an in-depth breakdown up on footballfilmroom.com by this weekend. You can get access to that as a founding member. We also have a lot of other great content on there, so I encourage you to check it out. Otherwise, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy a great Week 8 of NFL football, and I'll see you next time.